Hey everybody, it is a pleasure to have you back again. Welcome back to Earth OCU, Dragonball Edition. You might have noticed that I changed the thumbnails a little bit. That's just because YouTube kept cutting them off in ways that I didn't really want. But I'm your captain, and let's get ready to take another tour of the strongest Earth in the multiverse. Glad to have you around. I'm thinking, Bulma muttered. To say she hadn't expected to bust into a place like this would be an understatement. The weapons they were using were very advanced, easily dwarfing Stark Industries and closing out Capsule Corp. She thought she lived in the most advanced place on the planet, but getting into this place and through the force field on the outskirts took her nearly burning out every circuit in the ship, and that was only for a couple of seconds. She'd heard of Wakanda, of course, but she'd never seen it. There was no doubt in her mind. This was the apex of technology on the planet. Hi. Hey! Goku kindly helped the girl out of her flying car, Kal-El doing the same for the boy in the next seat. I'm Goku, he said, his tail wrapping around his waist. Bulma did her best not to freak out about that. I'm Bulma, she swallowed. Bulma briefs, she said, making sure not to look aggressive to the kid or the people around him. She gestured for Tony to do the same, preferably as quickly as possible. Right, yeah, Tony Stark, he said, glancing around the place. He wasn't used to being this outclassed in tech before. Heck, he wasn't used to being outclassed at all. Not since his dad. He wasn't sure he liked the feeling very much. Of Stark Industries? T'Challa asked, the boy staring down at him. Yeah, actually, Tony replied, his voice soon quieting as a general came up to them, staring at the gathered children. Tony gave a stern nod to Bulma. He, unlike Bulma, knew that they had royally stepped in it. His father did deals abroad and talked about it frequently. Jumping into a country that they weren't supposed to be in, especially one as powerful as Wakanda, it wasn't exactly the best idea in the world. It was best that they just went along with whatever these people wanted from them. The general led them to follow her, the duo doing just that, without missing a beat. Great plan, Bulma. A+ for effort, Tony whispered under his breath. Screw you, Tony, she shot back, not able to fully rebuff those criticisms. It's not that bad, right? She asked, Tony shaking his head. Kylos was a dead planet. Kylos was supposed to be a dead planet anyway. Thanos had practically burned the place to the ground when he was passing through. Peter knew that, Raditz knew that, all their intel said that, so finding not only a thriving city on the planet, but a fighting tournament that held their prize, the Purple Infinity Stone, for one team who would climb all the way to the top, that was pretty surprising. And their prize was under pretty good guard. This is a dumb idea, Raditz groaned. You said that about my last one, Peter said, both of them standing on the other side of the large steel gate. And that one worked. You want to enter into this grand universe alone, strike out, find our way back to Earth? Then we gotta make a name for ourselves. And what better way to get started? We win, the crowd cheers our name, and we get the Power Stone. Raditz's eye twitched. How about any other way? Okay, so you want to just bust in and take the Power Stone? The Kree already know where this place is. You might as well be lighting a beacon that we're already here, Peter said. Raditz couldn't deny that, but the Kree also already knew they were coming here. They couldn't afford to stay long either way. But it was too late. The gates opened, and Peter and Raditz stepped out. And entering onto the field now, the announcer blared, the Guardians of the Galaxy! The crowd's cheers dimmed as the pair of admittedly scrawny teens stepped out into the arena, the other individuals in the other teams already spread up about the corners of the arena. Yeah, I can just feel the joy in the air, Raditz gruffed out. Lighten up, buddy, we outclassed these people by a mile. Should be a piece of cake, Peter smirked. Piece of cake, an Earth expression, and it was one that Raditz had heard with an annoying amount of frequency lately. It was almost never true. If Raditz did ever try this cake stuff, he'd be shocked if it wasn't the roughest, sharpest thing he ever put in his mouth, because that's what the word was starting to mean. He and Peter got into their fighting stances. Alright, I hope you're ready, Quill. Always ready. Peter clicked his element guns on as they hummed in response, the duo jumping into the fight with all they had. That's what we're after, sir, Tony said, standing before not just the king of Wakanda, but several faces he didn't recognize. He didn't expect their little break-in to warrant a face-to-face meeting, but then again they were the first outsiders to actually break into the place successfully. Again, not the best idea. And this radar led you here, T'Chaka asked. It was curious, devices that could supposedly grant any wish. This was exactly the reason why T'Chaka thought Wakanda had to learn more about the outside world. It was full of so many wondrous and dangerous people and things. And the kids before him, the children of Stark Industries and the Capsule Corporation? He didn't trust many institutions of the outside world, but he knew Howard Stark. The man was a good person, one of the only allies Wakanda had in the outside world. His passing was mourned by T'Chaka privately. He had never expected to meet his son, though, but here he was, seeking to go off on a journey that might get him killed. And the Capsule Corporation had virtually eliminated serious poverty on their continent. Homelessness on Kami was practically unheard of. These two children were legacies of greatness, people that, if anything, should be protected, not shot out into the world. Or maybe the kind of attitude that allowed them to shoot themselves out into the world was what made their families great in the first place. Bulma and Tony nodded at each other as they pulled out the other two Dragon Balls in their possession, showing them to the crowd. Goku stared at the orbs in wonder. Oh, like this! He pulled out the 4-star ball from his pocket, the two geniuses locking eyes on it. Tony almost reached for it before he drew his hand back, the pair of friends bowing their heads as they asked Goku for the Dragon Ball. T'Chaka knelt down beside the boy and placed a hand on his shoulder. This is your decision, boy, he said, glancing at Goku's parents to make sure that they were okay with that being the case. Bardock didn't really care. He had been trying to make the boy more independent for a while. He and Kal-El had been dependent, especially on Guinea and Gohan, to the point that they were getting to be uncomfortable leaving them for a couple of days. The bond of a Saiyan family was important, sure, but so was being able to stand up on your own. I can't, Goku shook his head, Bulma and Tony stiffening in response. My grandpa gave this to me, and he told me to watch over it. I can't just give it to some random person and let them fly off with it. Bulma paused for a moment, a hand to her chin. Well, you could come with us, help us find the rest of the Dragon Balls, watch over your thing. It could be fun, she said, Tony nudging her hard. She was basically offering to kidnap the kids of someone who was friends with the most powerful person on Earth. Bardock sighed, waving the generals off, telling them to take the kids with them. He turned to the people in his room, ready to give them his thoughts. They should do it, Muesli said, shocking the others. Granola's a teenager now. He should achieve things on his own without me weighing him down. She gave a slight smile. It was only partially the truth. She needed space if she was going to pursue this Hydra thing, which she really needed. It was the perfect way to get her head back on track, and she needed her son not to be in the line of fire. If there was even a chance that this group, whoever they were, could kill him, she wanted them as far away from him as possible. Agreed, Bardock replied, Guinea nodding, not liking the fact that she was going to have to leave the boys that she had been raising for the last 7 years. Guinea called the kids back in, kneeling beside Goku and Kal-El. Is this what you two want to do? She asked, the boys looking at each other. Goku didn't want to leave his parents or his adopted grandfather. In fact, this was the farthest thing from what he wanted, but he was getting antsy lately. His family traveled, but they always made sure to keep him close, to attempt to slow him down since he tended to be a kind of loud kid. Cal, on the other hand, did want this. Helping people with his family had been some of the best times of his life, and he wanted to keep doing it, to do it even more than they'd been doing. The two boys stared at each other. Yeah, both boys said at the same time. Granola sighed. He was definitely going to have to go with them now. Knowing those two, there was a good chance that they'd bring the whole family down on them if they weren't careful. Goku turned to T'Challa and Shuri, but T'Chaka shook his head. I am sorry, but I cannot let both my heirs outside Wakanda's walls on such a dangerous quest. T'Chaka's kids immediately moved to protest, but a single glance from their father shot them down. You are both Wakanda's future. If you are lost to the outside world, who will there be to guide our people? He asked quietly. But, Father, you keep saying that the world is Wakanda's future, that they can't be separate any longer. T'Challa replied. Well, yes. How are we supposed to speak with the outside world if we know nothing about them until adulthood? Shuri asked. Should we not live amongst them, if only for a time? T'Chaka was silent, for once silently cursing what he taught his children to be smart beyond their years. He glanced once more at the other legacies, at the children of great changers of the world. And he sighed. His children did indeed have some form of a point. And the Guardians of the Galaxy take out yet another team. Only 3 remaining, the announcer blared out. Peter grinned at Raditz, who grinned back. It was actually working out pretty well for them, all things considered. The boys were leagues ahead of most of their competitors, except two. The first was just one person, a girl around their age with bright yellow markings on her face and green skin. She was strong, not quite as strong as Raditz, but she made up with that with her tactician skills that were on Peter's level. In other words, she was the best part of both of them in one person. The other was just strong, a big lunking force that they couldn't damage, even with Raditz's double sende. Raditz rushed the thing only to get kneed in the gut. The girl rushed up next to him, trying to thrash the thing in his side, only for his sword to break on the giant monk's skin, him grabbing her face and squeezing as she gasped out in pain. Peter fired a blast of mud, blinding the creature as he let go of the girl, and then he used another blast of rock to make the terrain that he was on as uneven as possible, making him fall back. Peter blasted him back with a jet of plasma, causing the monster to fall back a few feet. "Alright, time out," Peter yelled out, as he created a solid rock barrier around him, Raditz, and the girl. He breathed out a sigh of relief. "Alright, Peter began, getting cut off by the girl's dagger at his throat. Raditz leveled a ki blast at her in response. "Does nobody understand the words timeout anymore?" Peter asked. "Nobody?" "All I have to do is press this a bit further and I get the stone," the girl said. "Why would I?" "Maybe because if you do, I'll scatter you on the winds," Raditz replied. "Or, and hear me out, or you'll have to deal with the Iron Giant back there. That's also pretty darn important. You're definitely not going to win there," Peter said, the girl narrowing her eyes at him, putting her dagger to her side. "See, everything's alright, we're all friends here," Peter replied. "We just need to get past Big, Tall, and Creepy, and we stand a much better chance of doing that together." "Together," the girl hissed. "I don't even know you people." "Good point. Well, I'm Peter Quill, Star-Lord, and that grumpy lug over there is Raditz," Peter said, gesturing to the girl to say her name. She stayed silent. "Look, we either do this song and dance together, or we all go out, and that guy takes the stone. We can throttle each other over the stone later, but for now, we need to get that guy out of here. And to do that, we should probably be on at least a first-name basis, bare minimum." He reached his hand out toward the girl. She stared at it as she huffed, finally taking it. "My name is Gamora," she replied. "Okay, cool. Well, Gamora, how about we get together and come up with a plan to not lose what we all came for?" Peter said as the walls he created began shaking and crumpling. "Sooner rather than later, if you don't mind." The creature on the outside hammered the walls more and more, until eventually he punched through the barrier, the crowd screaming and roaring out their approval. The sight the creature was met with was Gamora standing over the seemingly unconscious bodies of Peter and Raditz. It smiled, narrowing its eyes at its now only target. Gamora rushed it, slashing a dagger at its leg, which of course did nothing, as she maneuvered around the creature, drawing it towards her, which it did follow without any hesitation. She kept maneuvering around its hits and strikes, every motion it made, until she found herself near the edge of the ring, nearly completely losing her balance and falling out of it. She regained her composure just in time for the figure to grab her throat, lifting her up in the air. She took as much of a breath as she could before she forced a shout out of her mouth. "Quill! Now!" Peter fired a blast at the ground, once more tripping the creature up, making it lose its grip on Gamora, just enough for her to kick herself loose, jumping above the creature. Peter looked at Raditz, both of them nodding. Peter's gun charged a plasma blast as big as he could possibly make it, as Raditz did the same with the key in his hands. "Double Sunday!" Raditz shouted. "Outlaw Onslaught!" Peter shouted. The two blasts collided, turning into one major one that created a nearly blinding source of energy washing over the creature, pushing it so fast that it didn't just go out of bounds, it went into the stands, crashing into the audience. "Outlaw Onslaught?" Raditz questioned. "What? You said all the time. Looked like fun," Peter said, walking over to where the creature was, making sure he didn't have any major surprises left. He didn't, thankfully. The only thing there was Gamora, dangling off the edge of the arena and cursing to herself. She had clearly gotten her other arm hurt in the process, so she only had a grip on the edge of the arena with one arm, and the tips of her fingers at that. She couldn't get the leverage to pull herself up. Raditz walked up beside Peter. Gamora cursed to herself. If she was either one of them, she could simply leave them to their own devices. They were a step away from victory, and she couldn't even blame them. Peter knelt down, likely from her perspective to pry her hand away. He put his hand near her own, all right, and then he grabbed it, pulling the girl up back to the safety of the ring. "Are you stupid?" Gamora asked. "What? We had a deal," Peter shrugged, Raditz nodding. We get rid of the big idiot, and then we have a fair fight to decide who gets to take the prize. It would be a stain on my honor to go against that, Raditz replied. Gamora, wide-eyed, stood up, brushing herself off as she reached for a weapon, a motion neither of the boys in front of her stopped. She stared at both of them, a light smile crossing her lips. I hope you both understand. I can't afford to hold back. I need that stone, she said pensively. But if I do lose, at least I know I lost to worthy opponents. Couldn't agree more, Greenie, Peter said, drawing his second element gun from his holster. Raditz too got into a fighting stance. It was time for them to decide all of this. The arena shook, something in the sky casting a shadow over the entirety of the area. A ship, a big one, and sitting on the bow of it, a Kree? A big guy too, nearly 7 feet tall from what the boys could see, holding a hammer twice his size. Those down on Kylos, you stand accused of holding a weapon of use to the Kree. Surrender it to us now, or face judgment. Ronan the Accuser, Gamora narrowed her eyes. I hadn't expected him to come yet. I knew we should have left sooner, Raditz grumbled. Relax, we just need to go to Plan B, Peter said, knowing full well that there was no Plan B. It was time to do something that no species did better than a human, in his experience anyway. Time to improvise. They were at the edge of the city of Wakanda, the entire city, including the Dora Milaje and the collected military force of the nation, all staring, watching the large replacement vehicle that the kingdom had provided to them. It looked just as normal as the ones that the kid had crashed into the hidden city. If anything, it looked even more normal. Just a large, basic RV that you could see on any street in the world. It only took Bulma and Tony a few moments to look past the surface. Completely bulletproof, not explosion-proof. It was hard to think of anything that could even remotely damage it. That was a real blow to Bulma's pride on its own, knowing that she could probably never make something close to as complicated as this. The worst aspect for her, however, was of the 5 kids who had piled into the back of the vehicle, 2 from the country that seemed to understand everything. They all seemed pretty non-overwhelmed by it, meaning that at least a couple of them were just as smart as she was, if not smarter. Probably good for them overall, but not great for Bulma's confidence. Add on to that the Prince and Princess of Wakanda were in her back seat. Apparently the king trusted the other kids to watch and protect them if need be. Weird enough for the most powerful nation on Earth, but the kids from the nation were also wearing special gear under their clothes that neither Bulma or Tony could even begin to understand. Alright everybody, Bulma swallowed hard as the army gave the kids a send-off salute. The next Dragon Ball appears to be all the way back in Kami, Bulma sighed. This thing doesn't fly, does it? Of course it does. I'd never build anything that couldn't, Shuri replied, pressing a few buttons down on the car, hovering a few feet off the floor. You built this? Tony asked. Everything except the navigation system, Shuri responded, pointing to her brother who was responsible for that particular innovation. Almost instantly, T'Challa leaned over the edge of the driving seat and grabbed the dragon radar from the protesting Bulma, and pressed on the screen as they began to get in sync with each other. The display on the screen changed, zooming down on a forest in the middle of nowhere. Huh, a clearer view of the place. You guys are pretty good at this. Tony smiled as the car blasted off into the air. They had gathered one heck of a team in only a few days. He might just get his wish yet. See you soon, Dad. He smiled to himself as the car left the Wakandan trail. Never would have pegged you for someone willing to let their kids go out of the nest so quick, Bardock said, watching his children go off with a smile. Their first time flying the coop. Took them long enough. Future leaders must know everything that they wish to lead, and with the technology in my children's clothing, it shouldn't be possible for anything to bring them harm, T'Chaka said, partially trying to convince himself of his own thoughts, though there was a deeper reason that he allowed this to happen. If Hydra gathered the Space Stone before his team was capable of doing so, he was sure it meant one thing. They would go after the largest possible threat to their rule, and right now, and for the foreseeable future, that was Wakanda. Full use of that stone was something T'Chaka feared. He was sure Wakanda could stop nearly any force on the planet. This was one of very few exceptions. Ine waved her children off, tears in her eyes as smoothly turned to T'Chaka with a look of stone on her face. Her son, the last surviving generation of the Ceruleans, was strong enough to survive anything on this world. Absolutely anything. And with his newfound family at his side, he'd have someone watching his back at every step of the way. As for her, she had something new on her mind, a target. How do we find this Hydra? She asked, her voice measured. Our records show the last known location of their base is located somewhere in Antarctica, This correlates with some of the vague energy waves that we picked up around the world, T'Chaka explained. I recommend that if you were to start anywhere, that would be a key area to begin. You should be able to use the GPS service I've embedded in your gauntlet to help you with the precise coordinates that we followed. It should also allow me to give you any updates if necessary. And what about you? Gine asked. Are you just gonna stay here? If you're trying to make sure I'll keep an eye on our children from afar, the answer is very much yes, T'Chaka replied, Gine letting out a breath she didn't know she was holding. But I am instead choosing to go somewhere different. Different how? Bardock asked. America, specifically New York City. I have a friend there. Someone who is capable of helping should the worst scenario come to pass. T'Chaka replied, the others mostly accepting it as Bardock stood to his feet, nodding to the others as they took off into the sky. Gine would probably make them stop by Kami to tell Gohan what they'd be up to, make sure that the guy knew that Goku and the others wouldn't be back for a bit, but that was a small price to pay. For both him and his son, the world was becoming a more interesting place. Bardock could only hope that somewhere, out in the depths of space, his other son was experiencing the same. Hey everybody! This is probably a bit of a shorter video this time around, but nonetheless I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you all soon. I've been your captain, and it's been a pleasure to take you on another tour of the strongest Earth in the multiverse. Bye now!